more reaction, but let's put you into some of the in-depth insights in the study that it's revealed with co-author of the study, who's also a research officer at the Economics and Excisable Products Research Unit at UCT, Samantha Filby. Samantha, good morning. Thanks for waking up early. I know it's a holiday and you could have been still lying in bed. But this has been termed the largest study of its kind ever carried out in South Africa. So congratulations on that. And I want you to share with our viewers the parameters of the study and what you initially set out to achieve.
Sure. Well, originally what we wanted to do was just understand the extent of the burden or the vaping burden in our country. You know, we anecdotally suspected that young people were taking up these products at alarming rates, especially given the manner in which they're marketed. And so we developed our sample design to approach as many schools who would talk to us, to ask their learners, in the last 30 days, did you vape? But not only do you currently vape, but how do you vape? How many days a week do you vape? Do you use a vape that contains nicotine or that doesn't contain nicotine? How long between waking up and getting out of bed do you wait before you have your first inhale of a vape? So we really just wanted to try and quantify the burden of vaping among young people, which is how many of them use it, but also how are they using these products and to what extent is their usage behavior symptomatic of an addiction to vaping.
And, you know, the findings are quite concerning because, you know, the common myth is, oh, vaping is a safer alternative to nicotine. You know, nothing bad's going to happen to you if you vape. And all of these products, as you say, marketed to target especially younger people, cool colors, different flavors, and so on. Some of them have LED lights and the like. But I want you to walk us through some of the marquee findings of your research in terms of those questions that you had asked young people, because the results are very concerning.
No, for sure. And thank you. For other approximately 25,000 learners in our sample, 16.8% reported that they currently use a vaping product. But as I alluded to, our interest wasn't just in understanding what proportion of learners vape, which is astronomically large. I mean, in addition to asking about vaping, we also ask learners, do you use cannabis? Do you use tobacco cigarettes? And the 16.8% of learners who told us that they currently vape is far higher than the proportion who reported say that they smoke tobacco cigarettes, which is down at a mere 2.1%. Cannabis usage rates are higher than tobacco cigarette usage rates at around 5.1%, but then you have vaping at a sky-high 16.8%, which really speaks to its ubiquity among our youth. But outside of just the fact that an alarmingly large proportion of learners are using these products, the way they are vaping is what is causing grave concern for us as people who are invested in public health. In our sample, we found that among the learners who indicated that they vape, 38% reported that they vape every day. This is learners between the ages of 13 and 18 that use their vapes every single day of the week. Moreover, we found that more than half of the learners in our sample reported that they vape 4 or more days per week. 88% of the kids in our sample reported that they use vapes that contain nicotine. This is highly dangerous given the adverse impacts of nicotine usage on a young person's developing brain. Lastly, in terms of the indicators I spoke about up front, around 47% of the learners in our sample told us that they vape within the first hour of waking up. This is like really symptomatic of nicotine addiction, when you're waking up and one of the first things you are doing to start your day is puffing on your nicotine vape.
Now, Samantha, again, as you say that, and you just think these are a cohort between 13 and 18 that you looked at, yet the ubiquity and the proliferation of vaping, of vapes, is attributable to its accessibility. I mean, shouldn't these products be restricted from sale for the very demographic that you had talked to? And it seems as if they are equally just easily available on some of these shopping apps.
Absolutely. And anecdotally, the other day I wanted to buy a watermelon off a very popular shopping app, and I typed watermelon to the search bar, and what came up was water-based, watermelon-flavored alcohol and watermelon vapes. And I was like, well, you know, what can one do about this? But truly, the ease of access to these products is a huge problem. How is it possible that such a large proportion of learners in our country are accessing these vapes? that really just facilitates young people's entry into this market when they are naturally curious. You're having these delicious, truly delicious looking products marketed in colorful, bright, and fruity. If they look good, you're young, you're curious, it's in your inclination on average as a young person to want to try things, perhaps to rebel. And so there really need to be measures in place to restrict the access of young people to these dangerous products.
Yeah, and you hear things like, oh, you know, I'm going to go buy some vape juice, and you got these vape shops, and it's, you know, it's just another subculture entirely that's developed. I'm going to talk about law, regulation, and enforcement in just a moment, Samantha. But I think it's really important at this juncture to talk about, I mean, we know, you know, over many decades since cigarettes came to be on vogue in the 50s and the 60s and so on, around, and even earlier, around the impact of long-term nicotine consumption. There are warnings and packages now around the propensity for contracting or you know, developing diseases like cancer. What exists that are long-term, even short-term health concerns around vaping? I mean, sometimes you know, you hear things around popcorn lung. I'm not sure if that encompassed the ambit of your inquiry, but if you do have information to share on that, please do.
Sure. So, you know, one of the arguments in favor of vaping is that it helps people quit smoking. You know, so now we're looking at seasoned adult cigarette smokers who are finding it impossible to quit tobacco cigarettes. And so we want to transition them to a product that does not contain tobacco, but contains nicotine. And that would be, say, a vaping product. Young people, people who have never been smokers, are completely stripped out of that discussion. When we are talking about the health and potential long-term implications of vaping on youth, we are talking about another kettle of fish. When you are a young adolescent person, your brain is undergoing a critical period of maturation. So substance use of any kind presents a challenge to your neurodevelopment in this quite vulnerable stage. So the starting point for the health harms of vaping when we are talking about our youth is that these products deliver a substance, and that substance is nicotine. Our research really underscores that it is a non-trivial aspect that these products deliver nicotine, because 88% of the learners in our sample who vape tell us that I use a vape that contains nicotine. Nicotine use during adolescence is harmful to a young person's brain, potential long-term effects on memory, learning, attention. Nicotine is also addictive. So you are in this phase as a young person, your brain is developing, and you're developing a neural pathway of addictive behavior. This comes with its own set of challenges, mental health challenges in particular, ranging from issues of anxiety to impulse control that can really exacerbate the mental health difficulties experienced by some of our teenagers. Even if we step outside of nicotine, which is a critical problem in the context of youth vaping in our country, the flavors themselves aren't good for you. That delicious vanilla, cinnamon, cherry that is so alluring to a young user, the chemical composition of those flavors have been shown to cause significant damage to things like the lung lining, your blood vessels, as well as your immune function. So truly, when we're thinking about our young people, we really need to place them in a separate category of urgent protection. These are not people who are seasoned cigarette smokers that can't quit. These are young people whose first foray into a potential lifetime of nicotine addiction and associated health harms is starting in our country. We are observing it, and the time to act is truly now.
And the people who must act immediately, of course, people just in the home. I mean, where's the pocket money? Where's the resource coming from? Or, you know, using the apps that make this access possible coming from? It's within their environment. So that's one opportunity. The other opportunity, Samantha, is the Tobacco Products and Electronic Delivery Systems Control Bill, and what that seeks to do to regulate how these products are available, who has access to them. So just enmesh also that access to the apps, for example, and how we can begin to regulate this and limit who has access to these vapes or e-cigarettes.
Yeah, completely. You know, the Tobacco Products Bill is really a centerpiece legislation for putting vaping into the regulatory net. And what was so striking for me as a predominantly tobacco researcher is to observe how cigarette smoking prevalence has declined in our own country, especially among the youth. I mean, 2.1% of the youth in our sample report smoking cigarettes. If I compare that to when I was a child in the 1990s, it's completely flipped over. And I do think that the earlier versions of the tobacco control bill that really restricted tobacco advertising, where and how you could buy tobacco, stricter enforcement of age restrictions, has been helpful in de-glamorizing and de-normalizing cigarette smoking. We now need a similar thing to come into place for vaping. Vaping is currently, outside of a small excise tax, is largely unregulated in our country. And so truly this bill is critical for reducing young people's access to vape. It's critical for restricting the marketing of these products, which is super important for countering the perception that vaping is safe. In our own study, we found that learners who believed that vaping is less harmful than tobacco cigarettes were significantly more likely to vape. And so when this bill comes into place, ensures that vapes cannot be sold near schools or online, when it will restrict vape advertising and marketing, ultimately, we are hoping to aid in the de-glamorization of vaping among young people and quelling that general curiosity that leads many of them to begin in the first place. But outside of this, I think that is important, the bill, for speaking to the regulatory initiation factors. How do we restrict access and how do we de-glamorize? We do that through banning sales in certain places and through restricting advertising and marketing. But on the other hand, we truly have to deal with the fact that we do currently sit with a large cohort of our young people who are currently addicted to these products. And that is where what you mentioned about parental involvement, school level involvement, how do we support these young people in coming off a highly addictive substance? And I think there we face significant challenges in terms of how do we go about supporting our youth in getting off these products.
Samantha, this is an interview. I really hope that parents and schools and everyone who is, around young people is able to watch again, because there's so much important information both on the adverse health consequences of both the flavorants and the nicotine in these vapes, but also just, the pending epidemic on nicotine addiction that is brewing in our schools as we speak. So thank you very much for coming on and sharing that information.